Hey, what's up, everybody? It's Mark Wohlers, a.k.a. Shark, the PA announcer and DJ from your Savannah Bananas, and you are watching the Legends on Deck podcast with hosts Brian Koss and David Conde.
I saw the light, I've been baptized by the fire in your touch and the flame in your eyes. I'm born to love again, I'm a brand new man. Well, the whole town's talking about the line I'm walking that leads right to your door. How I used to roam, I was rolling stone. I used to have a wild side, they say a country mile wide. I'd burn those beer joints down, that's all changed now. You turned my life around. Oh, I saw the light, I've been baptized by the fire in your touch and the flame in your eyes. I'm born to love again, I'm a brand new man. I used to love a man, leave him. Oh, I'd brag about my freedom, how no one could tie me down. Then I met you, now my heart beats true. Baby, you and me together feels more like forever than anything I've ever known. We're right on track, I ain't looking back.
Nothing fading.
Long drive left field. Has someone done it again? Baptized by the fire in your touch and the flame in your eyes. I'm born to love again, I'm a brand new man.
You know, you could send this guy to a resort during the spring and summer as long as he comes back in October.
I saw the light, I've been baptized by the fire in your touch and the flame in your eyes. I'm born to love again, I'm a brand new man.
Welcome to episode 81 of the Legends on Deck podcast. I'm Brian Koss, along with my co-host, David Conde.
I feel like I just saw you 2 days ago, Brian.
You might have, yeah. Yeah. Today's guest played 11 years in Major League Baseball, most notably with the Yankees, but also played with the Padres, Angels, Red Sox, Dodgers, and Rangers. Jim Leyritz debuted for the Yankees in 1990 and went on to win 2 championships in New York in 1996 and 1999. Jim, welcome to the show.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. How you guys doing today?
Good. Well,
Doing
we're in Florida, so we're dealing with the cold over here because I've been freezing for 3 days.
That you mean Florida freezing, not necessarily.
Florida cold, yeah.
It's not the New York that I'm used to. Originally from New York, not the New York cold. More of the go below 70. I'm freezing.
Exactly. Yeah. I'm in Orange County, California. When we get in the 50s, we're like, we're freezing here. Yeah.
Well, at least you get down to the 50s. I can't get past 70 because I'm done. So on our show, we like to kind of take our guests back in time. So kind of give us an idea, where you grew up, what brought you to the game, why, what brought you to baseball, and when did you kind of know that you were at the cusp of, playing at the next level?
Well, yeah, I was born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio. Grew up with a kid named Tommy Brenneman, who was my best friend growing up. And Tommy was an announcer. His dad was the announcer at that time for the Reds in the Big Red Machine years. And I got an opportunity, a couple spring trainings to go with him and the family to spring training in Tampa with the Reds, and got to be a bat boy a few times. And we stayed at the team hotel, so I got a chance to meet Pete Rose, Johnny Bench, Joe Morgan, Tony Perez, Davey Concepcion, all those great Big Red Machine guys back in the day. And I think, I kind of knew that I enjoyed baseball. I loved baseball, but basketball was my number one love. My father played at the Kent State University basketball, and up until my junior year of high school, I wore number 33. I wanted to be Larry Bird. I had an opportunity to go to Indiana State on a scholarship. So I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll play basketball. And then my dad grabbed me and he said, listen, you can go to college, you can be good, but you're never going to go pro. But you got an opportunity to play professional baseball if you choose baseball. And he said, you know, you're going to play both no matter what, but concentrate more on baseball your senior season. And so I did. I had a great senior year. 4 days before the draft, I decided to go out and play tennis with my best friend who was on the tennis team. And when I went up for a smash, I fractured my left foot to a point where it was only a small fracture. And the doctor said, just put this air cast on, you'll be good in 2 weeks. The problem was I was 4 days away from the draft. And while I was out playing tennis, my dad got a phone call that said, from 2 scouts that said, hey, we're going to make your kid a draft pick in 4 days. Is he willing to sign or does he want to go to college? And my dad said, well, make him an offer and, you know, we'll figure it out. And then they called him back the next day and said, okay, is he willing to sign? And my dad said, well, he's willing to sign right now no matter what because he just broke his foot.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And they said, you know what, we're going to pass on him. We're going to go ahead and we'll come back in 5 weeks and watch him when he plays. And back then I was playing summer ball for a team called the Midland Redskins. And anybody that knows anything about Cincinnati baseball, the Midland Redskins is where Ken Griffey Jr., me and Barry Larkin were teammates. You know, we had some pretty good baseball guys playing for this Midland team. So anyway, they were going to come back and watch me play 5 weeks later. So these 2 scouts, they came back, they watched me play. They went to my dad and said, you know what? Even though he can't squat yet and catch, we want to sign him. And my dad said, give him $10,000. And they said, well, we can only give him 5. And my dad said, screw that, he's going to college. So I went to junior college in Georgia for 2 years. I still wasn't able to fully catch because the leg wasn't fully healed. And I couldn't really squat on it. So I played third base in the outfield. Then I never got drafted. Went to Kentucky in my junior year, University of Kentucky. Didn't get drafted. Had a great year offensively, but I still wasn't catching. So I ended up going out to Hayes, Kansas, to play in the Jayhawk League, which is kind of like the Cape Cod League up in the East Coast. Yeah. And I went out to play in the Jayhawk League, and I told this coach I wanted to start catching again. I started catching, and all of a sudden, playing in a tournament in Wichita, I caught 3 games in a row, and this Yankee scout came up to me, and he said, hey, what are you doing catching? I said, I can catch. He said, not according to your draft card that we got from your college coach. It says you couldn't catch, so we passed on you. He said, but I just watched you catch 3 days in a row. You look like you're healthy. I said, yeah, I'm ready. He said, well, why don't we sign you? And so the next day I flew my dad out. We sat down. At that time, the Kansas City Royals came and said, we want to offer you a contract too. So we went back and forth between the 2 teams. The Yankees and the Royals gave me the same amount of money, but the Yankees would guarantee that if I didn't make it, I wanted to go back and get my degree, which I was only 12 hours short of, that I could go back to, they would pay for it. So my mom said, you're signing with the Yankees because if you don't make it, you're going back to college. So I ended up signing with the Yankees. Now, the great part about this story is those 2 scouts out of high school that wouldn't give me that extra $5,000, they were sitting in the stands in 1996 when I hit my home run against Atlanta. They were Atlanta Brave scouts. And they were sitting in John Schuerholz's box. And they said, do not tell Schuerholz, for $5,000, none of this would have ever happened. If you can imagine that, had I never been a Yankee, how that would have changed the course of history.
Oh, yeah. That's great.
Yeah. So that's where my love for baseball came in the beginning. Growing up in Cincinnati with the Reds, I got the opportunity, like I said, go to college for 3 years. and then signed with the New York Yankees. And, pretty much the rest was, an undrafted free agent. My chances were 2 million to 1 to make it even one day in the big leagues, much less 11-year career. And, 3 trips to the World Series, 2 winning and 1 losing. It was a pretty special time.
No doubt about it. So this is 1985, right? When you signed with the Yankees?
Yep. 1985. Okay. Yep. Yeah.
Gotcha. So we're talking so tell us a little bit about that minor league experience from 85 to, I believe you made your debut in 1990.
Yep.
In the big leagues. So what was that? What was minor league life like back then?
Yeah, so I showed up to spring training in 1990. It was the spring training of 96. I'm sorry, 86.
Yep.
And I showed up at spring training, and Bill Leyrtiz was the scout that signed me for the Yankees. And when he signed me, he said, "I'm going to put down, you can catch, play third, play the outfield, but you can hit, period." Mm-hmm. And so I showed up at the spring training, and Buck Showalter was the director of minor league personnel at the time and in charge of the minor league camp. And when I came in, he said, "Leyritz," and I raised my hand. He said, "Hey," he says, "here it says you don't have a position. What position do you play?" And I said, I want to go back to catching. So I went back to catching in the spring of 96 or 86. And then the funny thing was, guys, this is one of the stories I always tell. I grew up with Pete Rose. Like I said, I got to go to spring training with the Reds. One of the things that Pete Rose taught me as a very young player was that even if you didn't switch hit, always work on both sides of the plate when you're hitting in the batting cage, because that way it keeps your body even. You don't get off kiltered. So I always hit left-handed and right-handed in the batting cage. And so one day after spring training, I stayed after and I was hitting. And Roy White was the director of minor league hitting. And everybody else had left. I stayed after to hit because Pete Rose taught me that always be the last one to leave. And so I stayed after to hit. And Roy White comes walking by the batting cage and he goes, "Hey, Leyritz, what are you doing hitting left-handed?" I said, "Roy, I do this every day. I just work on it." He said, "Well, you got a pretty good stroke left-handed. We don't have any switch hitting catchers in the minor leagues. That could be a quick ticket to you for the big leagues. Maybe we should work on that." So I spent the entire rest of 86 spring training working on switch hitting. Wow. They decided, instead of sending me to Fort Lauderdale, single A, that they would send me to extended spring training in Sarasota to keep working on switch hitting. And I was there for about a month and a half, and I was hitting the ball great in basically the rookie ball. And they called me up to single A with Bucky Dent in Fort Lauderdale. And I went up there, and all of a sudden I started seeing breaking balls and cutters, and these guys had a little bit more good stuff than they did in rookie ball. And I was 10 for 34, my first 34 at bats, and I was 10 for 14 right-handed and 0 for 20 left-handed. And I was swinging at balls that were hitting me in my back leg because I wasn't used to seeing a breaking ball. And I walked into Bucky Dent's office and I said, "Bucky, I don't want to switch hit anymore." And he looked at me and he said, "I don't care. That's what you're here for. If you don't switch hit, I'm going to send you out." I said, "Well, then send me out. I could care less." And we got into a pretty heated argument. And he basically told me, "Kid, you'll never make it because you won't listen." And I said, "I don't care. If I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail with what I do best, and that's hit right-handed." So sure enough, 2 days later, I got sent back out to rookie ball in Oneonta. And this was 1986. And then I went on to hit 360 in the rest of the season in Oneonta. And the Yankee magazine came down and did an article on me. And they said, "What happened with the switch hitting?" And I said, "Well, there's a few coaches in our organization that don't know talent." And so I decided I was only going to hit right-handed. So this was 1986. Now, I went to the minor leagues. I led my first year in Fort Lauderdale in 1987. I won the batting title. I won the batting title in 1989 in Albany. And then when I got to my first big league camp, 1990, guess who was the manager of the New York Yankees? Bucky Dent.
Bucky
Yeah.
Dent.
Bucky Dent. So I go into spring training. I hit 385. I hit the home run to win the Mayor's Cup against the Mets the last game of spring training. I got my bags packed, ready to go to New York. And I walk in and I'm changing. And Champ Summers comes in and says, "Hey, Jimmy, Bucky wants to see you in the office." And I go in the office and I get the old, "Hey, great spring training, but we're going to start you off in AAA. We're going to send you down. Just remember what happened in single A." So they send me to AAA. Now, the irony of that is, guys, Bucky Dent gets fired on June 4th. When do I get called up? June 6th. So there's a reason for everything. And if Bucky Dent never gets fired, Jim Leyritz may never come up as a Yankee.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot of karma going on here.
Oh, yes. It was quite a journey through the minor leagues, because I had Buck Showalter as my manager pretty much all the way through. So basically, when he became the manager in 93, he knew what I could do because he had me all through the minor leagues. And that's why I started getting more opportunities in 93, 94, and 95 when Buck took over as manager.
That was awesome.
Yeah.
Kind of going to your debut, okay?
Yep.
The journey comes in. We've spoken to so many minor leaguers, so many guys that I know, friends of mine that have gone through the journey. Some made it, some didn't. What was it like? The aura of Yankee Stadium is to everyone is the Mecca, right? It's like the place everyone wants to be. So your first game in the majors, I mean, were you nervous? Did you know this is where you belonged? I mean, what was the feelings of that first game?
Well, it's interesting because we were playing in a doubleheader in Toledo, and I went 0 for 6. And I was throwing my helmet. I was pissed off. I was mad, first of all, that I didn't make the Yankees. But the whole time I was in AAA, I was saying, I belong in the big leagues. I don't belong here. I got screwed over. It was almost a running joke with the guys. And so after the game in Toledo, Rick Downs, who was our manager in AAA, calls me in the office and he says, "Hey, sit down." And I'm like, "Oh shit, I'm in trouble." I threw my helmet a few times. I was 0 for 6. And he goes, "I want you to sit down here and wait a minute." So I sat down, and all of a sudden he left the office. And then he comes back in with Alan Mills. And I'm like, "Okay, what's going on here?" And so he sits Alan Mills down next to me and he says, "Guys, this is the first time I've ever had an opportunity to do this. But the two of you are going to the big leagues tomorrow." And so Alan Mills and I, at 1:30 in the morning in Toledo, Ohio, found out we were going to the big leagues and we were going to join the Yankees in Baltimore. Because they were in Baltimore at the time.
So no sleep.
Well, exactly. So 1:30 in the morning, Alan and I got in a car. We drove to Columbus. We packed all of our stuff. And we were on a plane at 2 o'clock out of Columbus into Baltimore. We got to Baltimore around 5:30. We missed batting practice. And we walk into the stadium. Of course, we get to see our lockers for the first time in the big leagues. We were excited about that, but man, we were dead tired. And the one thing that we were happy about, because we didn't get there for BP, is we probably weren't going to play.
Yeah.
And so I'm sitting on the bench. I'm getting, I remember Steve Sachs and Don Mattingly. I met in spring training, and I got to know some of the guys, Dave LaPointe. So they're all congratulating me, and we're saying our hellos, and I'm watching the game, and it gets about the 4th or 5th inning, and Buck Showalter was one of the coaches at the time, and he came up to me and goes, "Hey, Jimmy, you may want to get loose because Stump likes to throw you guys in there right away," because Stump Merrill was the manager.
Mm-hmm.
And so I go in the locker room and I start stretching and watching the game on TV. And we get to the 8th inning, and all of a sudden, they were showing Greg Olson, who was at that time the best closer in baseball for the Baltimore Orioles. and at that time of the season was 13 for 13 in saves. And I see him warming up in the bullpen, and I go back to the bench and I sit down, and Showalter goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, he's right-handed. I'm not going to hit against him." And he goes, "Well, you never know, Jimmy. Stay ready." So sure enough, the ninth inning comes. We're losing 2-1. And Steve Sachs is on deck getting ready to go hit. And as he goes up to the plate, there's 2 outs. And Stump Merrill says, "Hey, Jimmy, you're hitting for Tollison," who was hitting behind Steve Sachs. So I go up to the on-deck circle, and I'm going, Sachs is not going to get a hit off this guy. It's Greg Olson. Well, sure enough, Sachs gets on base. All right, I come up to bat. The very first pitch he throws me is a 52-foot breaking ball. And I swung at it. But it got past the catcher, so now Sachs is at second base. Second pitch, he throws me another 59-foot curveball. I swung at it, missed it again. Now I'm 0-2, and then he wasted a fastball up out of the zone. And I was like, okay, that's just a pitch he's just showing. The next pitch, he threw a curveball, but he hung it, and it hit a line drive, but it was just foul down the first base line. And I was like, okay, now I got a chance to see, what it looks like. The next pitch, he comes back with another curveball, and I hit a base hit between second and third. Steve Sachs scores the tying run. So now I'm on first base. Randy Milligan was the first baseman, and he goes, "Congratulations, kid." And he had them throw over the ball, so I got the ball, and and so then we end up tying the game, and we go in for the bottom of the ninth inning, and I'm playing third base, and there's 1 out. And the guy hits a ground ball to my left, and I make a great play on it. But the bases were loaded. I make a great play on it, and I couldn't touch the bag and throw to first. So I threw a 1-hop ball to Matt Noakes at the plate, and he missed it, and we lost the game. So I kind of had a bittersweet first game. I got my first hit, tied up the game, but then I lost the game for us. But that was a pretty cool beginning. And then, like you mentioned, 2 days later, we come home for the first home game. And we are opening up against the Boston Red Sox. And it's my first game at Yankee Stadium. And guys, this is a day when the Yankees and the Red Sox hated each other. There were fights. There was no talking to these guys during batting practice, no slapping each other, nothing like that. We hated each other. And I get up and I get my first pinch hit in the 8th inning off Roger Clemens in Yankee Stadium. And I got a base hit off him. And of course I asked for the ball again because it was my first hit in Yankee Stadium. And I come in after I got the base hit. And now this is a whole nother story, but I'll tell it some other time. I had met Mr. Steinbrenner in 1988 at University of Florida, and I told him I would see him in a couple years. And at the time, he was, in that suspension place because of everything that was going on. And when I got the base hit, he sent a bottle of champagne down to my chair and a note that said, "Congratulations, kid. You told me you would see me here."
Oh, wow. You remember that. That's
and
awesome.
He remembered that. Yeah. So that was pretty cool. And that was my debut. But one of the really cool things that I have to share with you is that I had never been to New York. My agent was from New York. And when I got called up, I said, "Where am I going to stay when I get out of here in Baltimore?" He said, "I'm going to put you up in a New York hotel. And I want you to take the subway to the game." I'm a kid from Cincinnati, Ohio. I'm like, "Don't people get shot on the subway?" And he's like, no, trust me. Take the subway to the game, and then walk in the back entrance. And I'm like, this is really strange. So, okay, but I'm listening to my agent, right? He's my agent. So I walk in the back entrance. Well, in the old stadium, when you come off the subway and you walk in the back entrance, the first thing you walk into is Monument Park. My agent wanted me to see the history that I was coming into. And guys, my father it was a cross between Woody Hayes and Bobby Knight. You guys were pretty young, but I think you know the history between those two coaches.
Yeah.
My dad was never satisfied. Always told me when I reach one goal, always set up another one. So I get done. I walk across the field. I'm taking it all in. I walk into the locker room. And who am I sitting next to but Don Mattingly? I got a locker next to Don Mattingly. Now, Donnie wasn't there yet, but I'm seeing that I got this locker. So I walk into the clubhouse. I grab the clubhouse phone, and I call my dad up. I said, hey, Dad, I made it. I said, you're not going to believe this. I said, Yankee Stadium. I walked through Monument Park. I got to stand on the mound and take it all in. I go, and my locker's next to Don Mattingly. And he goes, Jimmy, that's awesome. He goes, that's great. He goes, can I ask you a question? I said, yeah. He goes, what are you going to do to stay there? He was always about that next thing.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So the crazy thing is, that's what my father says to me. So now I'm a little dejected because I'm like, he's not saying he's proud of me. So I go back down and I sit in my locker. And all of a sudden, 2 minutes later, Don Mattingly comes walking up. And he goes, hey, kid, I guess you're next to me. I said, yeah. I go, I guess I'm lucky enough to get next to you. And he said, well, here's what I'm going to tell you. If you don't ask questions, you won't last here very long.
That was a good invitation to saying, hey, we're here to help you.
Exactly. He was like, I don't care. For me, this is a superstar. This was a guy like, that I'm looking up to. And he says to me, Jimmy, I'm here to help you. It was probably, to this day, one of the greatest moments of my career of someone who was that was going to be there to help me. And after hearing my dad say, what's your next goal? It kind of set me up for, Donnie, I need you,
Yeah.
So between Donnie and Steve Sachs, those two guys, and David LaPointe, those three guys took me under their wing.
That was awesome. So I want to know one thing. So you're the night before you get called up, you're in AAA, right? You're in a doubleheader. What is your mindset when you're in a AAA game and in a bat compared to when you're in a major league game and in a bat? I mean, do you think differently? Is it like, all the nerves thing? I guess we always want to know. Are you nervous? Or, because you said you saw the curveball, you were able to read that, and you saw the fastball, and then you were able to kind of like adjust. So how were you able to adjust so quickly? Just, it's your debut.
Well, here's the thing. So my very first time ever in Yankee Stadium was when I was playing in Double-A with the Albany Colony Yankees. And you probably know the guy named Dave Island.
Mm-hmm.
Dave Island and I were roommates in Double-A. And we had an off day. And Dave said, you know what, I've never been to Yankee Stadium. Let's go see a game, because they were home. So we did. We made the 2.5-hour drive. We get to Yankee Stadium. We have seats right behind home plate that the Yankees got us. And we're sitting there, and there's 35,000 people in the stands. And this was when Don Mattingly was, the hit king. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, you hear Bob Shepard, now batting, number 23, Don Mattingly, number 23. And he comes up, and the crowd is screaming, they're yelling, they're all, and I'm looking at Dave Island, I'm going, dude, I can't wait to play here. This is going to be awesome. Listen to this. And sure enough, Donnie gets a base hit, and the crowd's going nuts. And about 3 innings later, Donnie comes up. They're losing 3-1. He's got men on second and third, and he pops up to second base. And every people in the stand was, Mattingly, you suck. You're the worst. You're out. And Dave looks at me and goes, dude, we got no chance here. And that was my first initiation to Yankee Stadium, what it would be like. So when you ask that, when I first came up to bat, when I got announced by Bob Shepard hitting against Roger Clemens, and I heard the 40,000 people screaming, it was the very first time, and probably the last time, that I wasn't able to block out what was going on around me, because I was trying to take it all in, because it was such a special moment. And then I realized, okay, this at bat is what I need to get back to concentrating on. I can't get caught up in all this stuff going on around me. Mm-hmm. And I went back to that, and that's when I locked in on Roger, and then I got the base hit. But But that was kind of the difference between playing in AA, AAA with 10 or 15,000 people
Yeah.
coming in with a Red Sox Yankee series and facing Roger Clemens. That was a little bit different.
I'm sure it's intimidating. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York. I was a Met fan, but I got to go to Yankee Stadium. I got to go to Shea Stadium, and it was very intimidating, even being in a fan, because the stadiums were rocking, and I could always imagine, like, what are these guys? Do they even hear each other? Like,
Yeah.
I can't hear myself think.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so yeah, I mean, honestly, you couldn't ask for a more exciting debut, I guess. Both on the road and at home. So those are great stories.
Yeah.
So you're on the Yankees. You're progressing in your career. You had some real nice seasons there in the early '90s. And then by an issue that came to mind for me was the Yankees had a great season in 1994. You were number one in the American League, 70-43, on track to potentially win the American League that year. Then the strike happens. So I believe the strike started in August sometime.
Yeah. Late August. Yep.
Yeah. So you were, 3/4, if not 80% into the season, and the strike happens. Has anyone ever talked about, and I'm sure the answer is yes, but would that Yankees dynasty might have started a little bit earlier had that strike not happened and you guys were able to finish out that season? It was a really good team you had.
Well, yeah. And if you remember in '94, there was no wild card. There was no
Right.
extra round of playoffs. It was whoever the two teams were they played, and it would have been us and the Expos.
Right.
And I feel more sorry for the Expos because they disbanded after that season. Had they gone to the World Series against us, it might have been different for Expos, for Montreal. But yeah, for me personally, it was probably even harder because I was in my last year of arbitration, and I would have gone into arbitration in 1995 as a full-time player with 300 at bats. And because of the strike, I wound up with 279 at bats. So when my agents went to arbitration and said, Jimmy's a full-time guy, he had 17 home runs and 59 RBIs. And if you project what he would have finished with, he would have had 20 and maybe 100. It was very hard because now instead of I was making, I think, 1.2 million, I would have made 5 million. Now I was still considered a part-time player in arbitration. And so I went from 1.2 to 1.6 or something like that. So that was very difficult as far as personally. But, what we struck for at the time of the strike, when Gene Orza and Don Fair were saying, guys, the highest paid player right now is Frank Thomas, making 8 million. One day, guys are going to make 20 if we just stay to this strike. And because there were some guys that wanted to cross the line, especially Frank and Lance Johnson, the guys that were making a lot of money. They wanted to cross the line and just go back to playing baseball. And Gene Orza and they told us this. Well, the fact that we stayed to that, and now you see guys making 50 million, I'm proud that we were the generation that started that because we stayed in strike. But at the same time, like you said, it was a very difficult time because that would have been Don Mattingly's first World Series. His opportunity to be in, something like that. But we were fortunate enough, of course, after that season got canceled, to be able to come back in '95 and win the wild card, which was the new thing.
The first time, yeah.
Yep. And get Don Mattingly to the playoffs for the first time.
Yeah, I didn't like the strike either. I was upset when the strike because I love baseball. I was like, "What are you doing, guys? Stop! I want to watch the games."
Well, and we thought for sure when it first started that it would not. There was no way they would cancel the World Series. They had never done it in history.
Sure.
And for it to be canceled, we were all kind of shocked. I mean, it was tough.
So that '95 season, you guys come in second place, wild card. You get to you lost in LDS, and then the magical year of 1996. So I have to say, like I said before, I'm a Met fan. Okay,
That's okay.
I am not a Yankee. My dad is. Marcus is my brother. He's my stepbrother. My stepfather. My real father is a Yankee. My brother. They're all Yankee fans. I'm the only one fan of the family, and I don't let my kids root for the Yankees. But in '96, I had a chance to go to the World Series. I actually went to Game One. I stood on the line at Yankee Stadium outside with my cousin, and it was an ordeal. And we actually got tickets and went to the game. So it was my first World Series game, left field, all the way up in the. I think I paid like $250 a ticket, nosebleed, but I got to watch the first game against Atlanta. That was my experience with it. What was your experience, one, in '96, being on that team with the players, with everyone that was a part of it, and then getting to the World Series? And then, we'll talk about what you did in the World Series, but what was it like playing that season?
Well, whenever I talk about the 96 team, the first thing I say is, how is there not a 30 for 30 on that 96 team?
Mm.
We start the season, all right, after, getting beat by Seattle the year before. But we start the season with Doc Gooden, Darryl Strawberry coming back from drug rehab.
Mm-hmm.
All right. We start the season with Joe Torre as the new manager.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, as you know, the back page, clueless Joe, they didn't give him a chance. All right. And, all of the changes that had happened from 95 to 96.
Mm-hmm.
And then all of a sudden, we get off to a good start and the team's playing well. And all of a sudden, David Cone has an aneurysm.
Yeah, I remember that. That's right.
Yeah. And all of a sudden, it just deflated the entire clubhouse. But what it did is it brought us closer together. And we all felt like, that was one of the things that Joe Torre was so good at, was always the next man up. Don't worry about, what, we feel bad that the guy's hurt, but we got more people in this dugout that could help. And he always made the 25 guys, every single one of them, feel important. So when David Cone went down, he went, and Doc Gooden was just getting ready to be set down. He went to Doc Gooden and said, "You got a second chance here. Make it count." And what did Doc Gooden do? He went out and threw a freaking no-hitter the first time he went out.
Yep. Crazy.
So just stories like that happened. And then, of course, we're playing good baseball, but we're still not over the edge yet. And then in August, when we're going through the hot days of August and September, all of a sudden, David Cone comes back from an aneurysm in Oakland, and he pitches 7 no-hit innings. It energized our entire team to a whole nother level, that we just took that and we rode it the rest of the way. And that's one of the reasons why I think that we went on that magical ride that we did in '96, because Coney gave us that extra lift that we needed when things were starting to kind of slow down. And just like stories, like I said, stories like that in that '96. And then, of course, when we get to the situations where we get to the playoffs, we win the playoffs, we get to the World Series, you go to Game 1 and you watch us get thumped.
I was like, nah.
You're up there going, yeah. Right? And we get thumped in Game 1. We get thumped in Game 2. Greg Maddux throws 89 pitches and beats us. All right. And we go to Atlanta down 2-0, and everybody and their brother, including the Atlanta Braves, came out and said, "Thank God we swept the Yankees, because we don't want to go back to New York. We're going to win it in our own place." And Joe Torre on the plane ride down took out that article and said, "Guys, we don't have to win 3 in a row. I told Steinbrenner we would, but I was just joking. But we don't have to win 3 in a row, but all we got to do is get this series back to New York, because they don't want to come back." And then, of course, we go in there, we win Game 3. Bernie Williams hits a big home run in that game. Coney gives that outing that we needed, where Joe Torre comes to the mound, almost the Grady Little backwards situation, where he leaves David Cone in and Coney gets the guy out. Just stuff like that. We win Game 3, and then we get to Game 4. And, we're now in a game that we're down 6-0 in the 5th inning. And I remember coming out of the locker room in the 5th inning and sitting next to Pat Kelly, who was injured at the time, but Pat was on the bench. And we were down 6-0, and all of a sudden, Joe Torre is saying, hey, let's just chip away. Let's just chip away. And then we score 3 runs in the 6th. But then Paul O'Neill and Tino Martinez come up with guys in scoring position, and they pinch hit for Girardi, and I forget who the other guy they pinch hit for, but they pinch hit those 2 guys, and we think this is our opportunity, and they both strike out. And I remember looking at Pat Kelly as I'm putting my catcher's gear on to go catch the 7th inning, looking at it and going, thank God we didn't get swept. Because they were warming up Mark Wohlers in the bullpen in the 7th inning. And we're like, okay, we didn't get swept. So we go out. Sure enough, I catch the bottom of the 7th inning. We come back in the top of the 8th inning. And all of a sudden, the magic starts. Charlie Hayes, swinging bunt. Darryl Strawberry, base hit. Mariano Duncan hits a routine double play ground ball. And they only get the 1 out. And then, of course, I come up. Now, while I'm sitting there before Mariano Duncan comes up to bat, I'm sitting there. I'm sitting in the dugout with Darryl Strawberry, who's sitting behind. I mean, not Darryl Strawberry. I'm sorry. I got to go back. Before the inning started, I'm in the dugout with Darryl Strawberry. And Wohlers is on the mound warming up. And Zimmer tells me that this guy throws 100 miles an hour. And I looked at Straw and I said, well, dude, we better get our stuff ready. I go, but listen, I only have 2 bats left for tomorrow against Smoltz, catching Andy Pettit. You got these brand new box of Mizunos. Can I steal one of those? He goes, yeah, go ahead and use one of those. So I took one of Darryl Strawberry's bats out of his box, put the pine tar on it to go up against the hit against Wohlers. And so Mariano hits the ground ball. I go up to bat against Wohlers with a brand new bat. And sure enough, the first pitch, he throws me a 98-mile-an-hour fastball. It looked like I fouled it straight back, but I looked at the bat. And again, it was a brand new bat. There was 1 mark. It was right on the label.
Wow.
I was nowhere near getting out in front of that ball. But it looked like it. So now he throws me 2 sliders for 2 balls. And then he comes back with a 99-mile-an-hour fastball. That, again, I take a great hack at it, and I follow it back. But I look on the bat again. It's right next to the other mark. So now I'm at 2-2. And I said, okay, you know what? I'm going to take a little step off the plate and, just look out of the plate, because if he throws a fastball in, I can't hit it. And sure enough, he threw another slider and he hung it. And that's when I hit the home run. And all of a sudden, history changed.
So you're in a dugout with guys who've played in the World Series. You got Strawberry. I don't remember who else in that team had won one prior to that. But what was it like with them? Were they calm? Were they say, hey, guys, did they help with the whole, getting you guys ready? Or was it just a cohesiveness of that team that you had that was just something about it was just special? Like, it like you guys leaned on each other, yes, but what was it that really, got you guys going?
Well, listen, I mean, you talked to all the guys that were on that 96 team. There was some doubt after the 7th inning when O'Neill and them struck out that was it. That was our one chance. And that there's no way we were going to beat the Atlanta Braves 90s Mariano Rivera, because that's who Mark Wohlers was for them. And for us to go do what we did, after I hit that home run, everything changed. Yeah. Our confidence level, the chance, when we end up winning that game on a walk by Wade Boggs with the bases loaded, when we won that game, there was about a 15-minute break between when they would let the news people in to do interviews after the game. That we had about a 15-minute window, and that's when Torre would talk to us and say, hey, great job, great game. So we get done with that, and Joe Torre calls me in the office and he says, hey, I don't think I'm going to catch you tomorrow. I go, what are you talking about? He said, well, Andy didn't shake you off the first game, and this is a big game coming up in Game 5, and I might go with Girardi tomorrow. And I said, Joe, I don't care what you do. I just hit the biggest home run of my life. I can't wait to go talk to the reporters. You do whatever you want. And I walked out. And as I walked out, Andy Pettit goes, hey, I'm so glad that we're not facing elimination tomorrow. we got to go get him tomorrow. And I said, well, yeah, it might be you and Girardi. He goes, what are you talking about? And I don't know what happened in the next 5-10 minutes. I got called back into Joe Torre's office before the reporters got in. And Joe says to me, okay, you're catching tomorrow, but stay with the game plan. And I was like, okay, great. Again, I was still on cloud nine about hitting a home run. And then we go, and then of course, what everybody felt in that dugout or in that locker room was that after winning game 4, we now have the series going back to New York.
Mm-hmm.
Andy Pettitte was not pitching an elimination game, so he could get some sleep that night. And Andy will be the first one to tell you he's not much better knowing it wasn't an elimination game. All right. And so sure enough, we go out and he pitches game 5, that 1-0 game, which is probably one of the greatest games he's ever pitched in the postseason. Even John Smoltz, who lost the game, says that's one of his greatest ever pitched games, in the postseason. And we win 1-0, and we go back to New York, and we went in game 6, and all of a sudden the history has changed. And like I told you that story earlier, had the Braves given me $5,000 more, none of that ever would have happened.
You would have come up with the big home runs, the big hits, and actually catching an amazing game that he pitched. So
yeah.
It's. I mean, you look at the lineup up and down from the '86 team. I mean, star after star after star. I guess it must have been like amazing just to be in that group and to learn and to grow with them and to win with them. It must have, to be a part of that team. I mean, you're a star in itself. I'm just saying that those names where they played prior. I mean,
well, when you look back on these teams, one of the things that Joe Torre always talks about is that he had a roster that had Darryl Strawberry, Jim Leyritz, and Tim Raines on his bench. Yeah. They weren't even in the starting lineup. So if you're the opposing manager and you go to a righty and you have to face Darryl Strawberry, or you go to a lefty and you have to face Jim Leyritz, or if Tim Raines is on the bench, you don't have a choice. You got one or the other. He can switch hit. It makes the decision for the other manager in that other dugout very difficult. And that's what Joe Torre said. I always felt like I had an edge because I had the advantage. No matter what move was made against me, that I had an answer. And he felt the same way about his bullpen with Jeff Nelson, Mike Stanton, Mariano Rivera as a setup man, and John Wetland. And you think about that, guys, and I don't know if anybody else in the history of baseball since 1996, 97, 98, 99, 2000, when that history run that the Yankees had, if there's ever been a team that had bench depth on the offensive side and bullpen depth on the pitching side,
that's true,
more deeper than those Yankee teams of the 90s. And that's the reason they were so successful.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
no question about it.
That's Gene Michael and Buck Showalter creating that atmosphere. And then Joe Torre and Bob Watson carrying it on. And then, of course, Brian Cashman coming in after 99.
Yep.
You guys I'm looking at the roster. You had Cecil Fielder on that bench too.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, they make the trade halfway through the season. Ruben Sierra for Cecil Fielder.
Ruben Sierra, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. And Cecil comes in and he hits the biggest double in game 5 to help us win that game. So
it's incredible. So you guys go from 96. So for the next 2 seasons, you jump around, right? So you're in 4 different cities in 2 years before coming back to New York eventually.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what it was like leaving and then coming back to that 99 championship team.
So as I mentioned to you before, I had met George Steinbrenner 2 years ago in the minor leagues before I got called up to the big leagues. And then him and I had a really special relationship my first couple of years with the Yankees because my agent was his drinking buddy. and they hung out together. And even when George was suspended, I was hearing from George every single day. And I got to be really, really close with Mr. Steinbrenner. And basically, after I hit the home run in 96, I walked into his office and said, hey, if I don't have an opportunity to play every day next year, if Tom, who was Tom Richards, my agent, I said, if Tom can find me a place to go play every day, will you give me that opportunity? And he said, Jimmy, for you, I'd do that. And sure enough, a month later, I'm out on the fields in Tampa, working out at the Yankee minor league complex, getting ready for the season. And I get called. We didn't have cell phones back then. And I get called off the field. And it's, I forget, I don't even remember who called me, but it was George Bradley, I think it was, that called me and said, hey, Jimmy, you've been traded to the California Angels. I'm sorry, it was my agent. It was Tom Rich. Tom said, hey, Jimmy, we got you traded. You got a 3-year deal with the Anaheim Angels. You're going to Anaheim to play for the Angels. And George allowed it. So I'm on cloud nine. It's the first 7 years in the big leagues, I had a 1-year contract. I finally got a 3-year deal for $5.4 million, which was a lot of money back then. All right. And my first 3-year guarantee, I was on cloud nine. So I go in the locker room, I pack up all my Yankee gear. I walk into Mr. Steinbrenner's office. I put my bag down and I said, Mr. Steinbrenner, thank you so much for the opportunity to play every day. I hate leaving New York, but I really thank you for giving me this opportunity to play every day. And he said, you know what? You deserve it. He said, but why do you have your bag packed? I said, well, I'm not a Yankee anymore. He said, Jimmy, put your bag back, unpack it. You will always be a Yankee, and you can work out here as long as you want. That was George Steinbrenner. That was his loyalty. And then sure enough, I went away in 97, 98. I go to the Padres. I started with the Red Sox, and I hated Joe Kerrigan. So I asked for a trade. I get traded from the Red Sox to the Padres, and all of a sudden the Padres go on their run, and we end up playing in the World Series against the Yankees in 1998. And I'm on the other side. And that was crazy. And, I hit a bunch of home runs to get the Padres to the World Series. And then we play the Yankees. And it was kind of strange playing my best friends. And I went 0 for 10 in the series against the Yankees. So didn't get a hit. But I hit the ball pretty good, but just right at them. And the Yankees end up sweeping us in 4 games. But to San Diego's pleasure, we played so well during that time that the fans in November, when they took the vote for the new stadium, Petco Park, they approved it because they were so in love with the Padre team. And so the 98 Padre team always gets credit for getting Petco Park. So to be part of something like that was pretty special. And then in 1999, they started trading everybody, and I get traded back to the Yankees. Now, this is a fun story. So I end up breaking my hand June 21st. And now there's a chance I may not get traded away from the Padres because Kevin Tower said he was going to keep me till July and then trade me in July because he wanted me to work with the young pitchers as a catcher. So we get there, and sure enough, so I worked my rehab as hard as I could. And on July 27th, I get sent out to the minor leagues to do a rehab to show other teams that are going to the playoffs that I can swing the bat. Mm-hmm. And I played 3 games in Rancho Cucamonga. Then I went to Vegas for AAA. I played 2 games in Vegas. And all of a sudden, I get a phone call from Kevin Towers. He says, hey, Jimmy, I got 2 days left to trade you. I need to get somebody for you. We've got a deal with the Red Sox. And I said, Kevin, no, I cannot go back to the Red Sox. I don't want to do that. Can you give me 24 hours? And he said, what? Why? I go, can you give me 24 hours? So sure enough, I made a phone call to the Yankees. I talked to, one of Mr. Steinbrenner's assistants and said, hey, Mr. Steinbrenner, let Mr. Steinbrenner know they're trying to trade me back to the Red Sox for the playoffs. I don't want to go. Within 12 hours, I was traded back to the New York Yankees. And sure enough, I got traded back. I show up at the Yankees. Joe Torre calls me in the office and says, "We didn't know this was happening. Steinbrenner did this." He said, "You know, all of the reporters are going to ask, are you back here to catch Andy Pettitte?" Because he was struggling at the time. "You're not here to do that. You're here to be a right-handed bat off the bench. You'll spell Tino at first base against the tough left-handers, but you're just here for the playoff." And that was it. And then, of course, we get into the 99 World Series. I only get the one at bat, a pinch hit at bat in game 4. And I hit the last home run of the century off Terry Mulholland. and Roger Clemens ends up winning the game. His last game as his game as a Yankee to become a World Series champ for the first time. So that was pretty special.
You had some special teams back then, but I will say the next season, I do want to ask about the 2000 season.
Oh, yeah.
Because that was the only magical year the Mets had, even though, I didn't expect them to get there. So you start with the Yankees. What has you getting sent out was it mid-season?
So I think it was towards the deadline. And what happened was Chuck Knobloch couldn't throw the ball to first base.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And yeah. And at that time, they needed somebody that could throw the ball to first base. And so the Los Angeles Dodgers needed a right-handed bat pinch hitter off the bench. Who better than me? And at the time, Kevin Brown, who was with my teammate in San Diego, was with the Dodgers. When they went to him and said, "Hey, what about Leyrtiz?" He said, "Get him. He's meant for the postseason." And at that time, we thought as the Dodgers were going to the postseason. So they made a trade for me for Jose Vizcaíno, who came over to play second base for Knobloch. And I get traded to the Dodgers and finish the season with the Dodgers. Now, here's the funny thing, because I consider myself, you guys say, 2-time World Series champion. And up until I was 51 years old, I said I was a 2-time World Series champion. And then all of a sudden in 51, I found out Jorge Posada said he's a 5-time World Series champion. And I was like, wait a minute. Jorge wasn't on the roster in 96 for the World Series. How was he a World Series champion? Well, because he was part of the team and he got a ring, you're considered a champ.
Yep.
Well, I got a ring in 2000. I got a check in 2000. So I am technically a 3-time World Series champion.
But you didn't get
there you go. We'll make the correction.
But you didn't get the privilege of really beating the Mets, though. That would have probably been awesome.
I did not. But I got to sit there and watch it.
Okay.
Yeah. I got to sit there and watch it. And, honestly, it was tough because I was bitter about being traded. I thought I was going to retire as a Yankee. And I was a little bitter because I got traded. And at the same time, sorry, dude, I could never root for the Mets.
It's okay. Hey, it's okay. I'm a baseball. I mean, I'm not as crazy. Only Mets only. I'm more of a baseball fan now. But back then, it was the first Subway Series that I have ever seen. And I'll tell you my quick. Yankee Stadium was a little crazy because I was there in one of the playoffs against Baltimore. I think I was at the game when against the Orioles when the kid caught Jeter's ball.
Yeah.
I was there. I was in the bleachers.
Yeah.
And they were beating up some people that didn't have Yankee uniforms. So in 2000, my buddy and I, we go to ESPN Sports. ESPN's on to watch the World Series. We walk in, we have Mets gear on. All we see are Yankee fans. We walked out, went back to Queens. I was like,
So here's a funny story. So you guys lose in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
I got hurt with the Dodgers in September. I tore my rotator cuff and my labrum. And it took me all the way up, and I didn't have a contract for 2001. So at that time, HGH, the growth hormone was not against the rules, and I took the growth hormone to heal quick. And I healed quick enough to a point where I called up the Mets and talked to Steve Phillips and said, "Hey, I want an opportunity. You give me a minor league invite with a chance to make the team. And if I'm not 100% ready, I'll go to the minor leagues for a month till I'm ready to play." And so we agreed to a contract. I was a New York Met in spring training in 2001. I wore number 16 for Doc Gooden. And I still have my Mets spring training jersey. But I ended up hurting my shoulder again, like March 17th or 18th. And they ended up releasing me. So I never got the opportunity to be a Met.
Well, at least you got the jersey.
Exactly.
But so you got the Red Sox, you play with the Yankees, you play with you had the Met jersey.
Padres.
I apologize.
Texas Rangers.
Yeah, but I'm
Texas
saying
Rangers,
like with the rival of the Northeast, normally you got guys going from the Yankees to the Red Sox to the Mets, so we all kind of share some of the same ball players. Just kind of looking back at your career, who do you think? Who can you share? I mean, you shared a lot of great names. What is one or two guys that really stood out, that really helped you in your career and got you to where you were, and really with like a mentor type person? Who was that one, two people that were there for you?
I mean, I always talk about it. Unfortunately, he just passed. Pete Rose is probably my biggest influence. Like I mentioned before, there's a lot of opportunity to talk to him in spring training when we were with Tommy Brennaman and them. And I remember one day asking Pete, because Pete was Mr. Clutch too. And I said to Mr. Rose, how are you so good in the clutch? How are you so good in big moments? And he said, you know what, Jimmy, we're in spring training right now. Every single at bat that I have is the most important one. He said, I don't treat any at bat any differently, whether it's practice, spring training, first game of the year, or the last game of the year. He said, all I make important is that one at bat. He said, the reason if I do that and I make that the most important thing, it doesn't matter what's going on around me. That at bat is the most important thing to me. And I'm focused on that. And I don't get caught up in everything else. He said, and that's where I've been so successful in my career. I don't hear the 50,000. I don't hear that it's a spring training game. I don't care if it's the All-Star game and I got to take out Ray Fosse. That's how I play every game. Yeah. Every opportunity is possibly my last opportunity. So I treat it as the most important. Therefore, it doesn't matter when it happens. I won't get caught up in it. And at 13 years old, I took that to heart. And when I played basketball, I wanted the last shot in the basketball game. I wanted to become the guy and come up on base with the bases loaded in the last inning of the game to get the big hit. I started doing that as a young kid. So by the time I got to the big leagues, every at bat was important, because if you remember when I first came up, I wasn't an everyday player. So if I didn't go 2 for 3, if I didn't go 3 for 4, I may not have played the next day. So I could not waste an at bat. Like I couldn't go 2 for 2 and say, I'm going to try to hit a home run just because I already got 2 hits. I had to try to get 3 hits because I wasn't going to be in the lineup possibly if I didn't get a hit. So I already had that pressure of playing for my opportunities, even when I was just playing part-time. So when I got into the big moments in the playoffs and World Series, I didn't get caught up in everything that was going on around me. It was me against the pitcher, and that was it. And I think that's what really helped me really slow down those situations in those big moments, to be able to come through as many times as it wasn't just once, like Bucky Dent or Chris Chandler. It was quite a few times.
You probably have Pete Rose's voice in your ear when you're at bat, reminding you, hey, stick with it. This is the moment. Just take advantage.
Well, I mentioned my dad earlier. My dad used to tell me, Jimmy, you play 2 sports that are team sports, but the most important times, it's you against the other person. So for you, for hitting, it's you against the pitcher, nobody else. When you get fouled and you're shooting a free throw to win the game, it's you in the basket, nobody else. You can't blame anybody else but yourself if you don't come through in those times. So those why during those times, I didn't get caught up if it was Roger Clemens, Mark Wohlers, Sandy Koufax, Nolan Ryan, whoever it might be. I didn't get caught up in that. All I got caught up in, I got to get a base hit. I got to get a hit here. And that was my mentality, no matter it was first game of spring training or the last game of the year. And if you talk to other guys who have had success in pressure situations, it's kind of the same thing they'll say is, we didn't get caught up in what was going on around us. As a matter of fact, we kind of slowed things down in those bigger moments.
Well, I'm sure you said to yourself, I'm Jim Leyritz. I don't care if you're Nolan
Yeah,
Ryan, and I'm going to get a hit. I don't care.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's the same plate. You got to throw that ball over that plate, Yeah.
Well, Jim, I got a quick question for you that just came to mind.
Good.
You hear a lot of former ball players that played for years that, for in your era, commenting on today's era of baseball, right? Um, I'm gonna go two different ways. Can you tell me one thing you like about modern baseball today and the players, the atmosphere, the whole thing, and one thing that you would criticize about baseball today?
Well, I'll say there's one thing I do like.
Yeah.
um, I like the fact that these guys are actually embracing the moments, because when we played, we never really truly, like Derek Jeter will tell you, we never really truly enjoyed the moments till it was all done.
Yeah.
We didn't do all this celebrating like they do now and all that stuff. I think that's part of what they accept today. It's also one of the things that I hate the most.
Yeah.
Being a traditional kind of guy.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
But I'm also one of the guys too that I'm not an old school guy that says if the game has changed for all of them and they don't mind that, then you know what? Let them run with it. The one thing I hate about the game, I hate the clock.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I've been saying that.
I hate the clock. I hate the fact that the guys can't pitch in. I really wish I was playing in this era because even at 350 at bats or 300 at bats, as much as I got, I still think I could hit 50 home runs if I never had to worry about getting knocked down after hitting a home run, swinging as hard as I could. Because if you took a hard swing off Roger Clemens, he was going to send a message to you your next pitch. And there was a lot of guys like that did that. The old school pitchers, the Jack Morrises, not just the Nolan Ryans and the Bob Gibsons and the Roger Clemens. The guys like Jack Morris and guys like David Cohn, they would send some messages at you. They didn't want you to get too comfortable. And I think that's a big difference in today's game. I watched the one, and it was just, Big Poppy, I think, was 11 for 18 in a playoff series. But never once was he moved off the plate. Never once. I don't necessarily mean hit him, but move his feet.
Yep.
Make him feel uncomfortable. That's the part that I don't see in today's game. And, of course, I like the sabermetrics as a tool, but I hate it that it rules the game because you see so many things. I think we've kind of started moving back the other way. I think we've started to realize, yeah, it's a good tool, but it can't be the end-all, be-all. And I think guys like Bruce Bochy, who manage a little bit differently with the old school, I think we're starting to see a combination of the two. Yeah. So I think baseball is going to get better and better. But yeah, to me, sabermetrics, the clock, I hate as an end-all, be-all to baseball. Yeah. I think it should be a 30-second clock. Yes, if you want to speed it up a little bit and not have these 4-hour games, make it a 30-second clock. Give the pitcher a time also to be able to get his breath a little bit, especially in July and August and September when it's as hot as it is. Because right now, as you see, most of the hitters, they're using the timeout about 8 or 9 seconds in to get that extra time. So just make it a 30-second clock all around. You'll speed the game up a little bit. At the same time, the continuity will continue.
Well, my whole thing I always tell Brian is, okay, well, we have the clock, but then you have a challenge, so you get the time on the challenge anyway. So there goes the time where the time goes.
Yeah, exactly.
So you're rushing the pitchers to hurry up, and then you call it challenge. Oh, now we're gonna wait 10 minutes if umpires to figure something out.
Exactly. Yeah. So for me, I think those are the negatives and positives.
Yeah, we talk about the sabermetric stuff too, and just the kind of the overuse of it. And it gets to the point where you're watching a broadcast of a game on like ESPN, and they're just throwing statistics and this out, and it's like, okay, well, that's great. Like you have the statistics, you have to go kind of research what they mean because you're trying to figure out what the formula is, right? And everything's about launch angle and hit rate, the speed of the ball off the bat. And
So
at the end of the day, it's really about getting hits, not
so,
necessarily how hard the ball's coming off the bat.
so I mentioned I grew up with the Big Red Machine,
Right.
and we listened to every single game on the
Yeah.
radio with Marty Brenneman and Joe Nuxall. And
Nice.
we would turn the TV on because we hated the TV announcers, and we listened to the radio as we watched the game on TV.
Mm-hmm.
And every time Tony Perez, who didn't speak a whole lot of English, right? Every time Tony Perez was star of the game, Joe Nuxall would say, "Hey, Tony, what are you doing different? Now that you've been hitting the ball so well, you're on a hot streak. What are you doing different?" Tony Perez says, "I see the ball, I hit it. That's it."
That's right.
That would be what my dad would tell me every single time. I would say, "Dad, I'm struggling. I can't pick this up. I can't do it." He goes, "Jimmy, see the ball and hit it. Make it simple. Don't get." And for these guys to be looking at, especially college, when they're looking at their little, their little scorecards and their things, you're going,
Yeah.
I'm like, what could they? How about see the ball, recognize, and put a good swing on it? That's as simple as hitting can be. And I think that's what they need to get back to. One of the things that killed me for all these years was the shift.
Yeah.
I would sit there and watch Mark Teixeira and Joey Gallo and all these guys with the whole side of the infield wide open and go, "You're hitting 180.
Yeah.
How are you not hitting line drives through the left side of the infield all day long to get your average up and then get them to shift? And then you could go ahead and do what you got to do." And they never did it. And even what was so frustrating as a hitting guy was watching them. And then even when they're being pitched away, still not hitting the ball.
Yeah, trying to they roll over and they're trying to pull it the same place and they roll it down.
Because I remember going up the bat going, okay, where's the biggest hole? Tony Gwynn, 5'6" hole. If you left Tony Gwynn more than 10 feet on the left side of the infield, he was hitting a ground ball through it every single time. Right. That's how we used to hit. And it just, that part has changed where to a point where a ground ball base hit through the infield, you don't get points for, but you'll get points for striking out because you took 3 good swings. I mean, to me, that's the sabermetric that I don't understand whatsoever, is how a strikeout can be better than a base hit ground ball through the infield.
It's funny you say all that. I coach baseball, so my age group is up to 16, and we had games this summer, and I always tell the kids, hey, look at the field. What are they giving you? Look at the gap to right field. And they're like, what do you mean, coach? Hit the ball into the hole. Like, hit the ball the other way. They're giving you the hole. Why are you trying to pull everything? Like, wait on the ball and go the other way. But it's the whole mindset and all the kids say it too. It's just, oh, what's my velo, coach? And what's this? I'm like, I don't know. Just go hit the ball. I don't care.
You think David Cohn worried about what his velo was or his breaking? He threw from 7 different angles. I mean, it was a matter of tricking the hitters. And the bottom line was, I don't care what your spin rate is. I don't care what your velo is. If you're throwing the ball down the middle, you're getting hit. And that's one of the things that I think if a good pitching coach gets a hold of these guys and says, Roger Clemens came out and said it the best about 5 years ago with all this sabermetric stuff and all this. He said, when I came up in 1984, 86, or whatever it was, he said, when I first came up, I was throwing 98 miles an hour every pitch in spring training. And the pitching coach came up to me and said, hey, kid, how long do you want to last in this game? And I said, what do you mean? What are you talking about? And Roger said, the coach said to me, learn how to throw 93, 94 on the corners. And then when you need that 98, reach back and get it. And you'll last a lot longer in this league, son. And he said, Roger goes, that's why I lasted as long as I did. Because I could
off speed.
I learned how to pitch instead of just throw. And you see why these guys are getting hurt. Everything is max effort every single time. There's no way your body's cut out for that.
Right.
That's why I think starters what's going to happen, starters are going to go 4 innings. They're going to say, well, we'll just give him the win in 4 innings because he's not going to last any longer.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the way it's going. Well, Jim, I can't. David and I will be talking about this for a while because I can't think of any more. There's so many stories, so many nuggets that you gave us. we really appreciate you coming on to share your baseball journey with us. And we'll be happy to have you on again to tell another couple stories here. We'd love it. Where
I wrote the
people
book.
find you?
Oh,
What are you up to today?
Yeah.
So I wrote the book, Catching Heat.
Okay.
All right. It came out in 2011 or 12. And pretty much it's about never getting drafted, making it to the big leagues, making it in New York, having the big moments in the postseason, but then giving all that up to come home and be the best teammate of all. And that was Dad. When I had the situation in 2003, when the Padres offered me $1 million contract to come back and play. And I had just gotten custody of my 3 boys because my ex-wife had some drug problems, and they were 2, 7, and 9 years old. And the judge in Florida said, if you go back to play, you'll lose your kids. And I gave up the $1 million contract, and I stayed home, and I became a full-time dad. And during 2004 to 2007, I wrote a book called it's called The King and Dad, and that was with Burton Rocks. And then I had a car accident, and that got all by the wayside, and the book never came out. During my 3 years of waiting for the trial, I wrote a book. I wrote 3 more chapters about how I was being mistreated, how the state attorney was running to become a judge, and she was using my name, and that I needed to get the court to clear my name, and it finally happened. And then I wrote the last 3 chapters, and then we came out with a new name for the book called Catching Heat, because I caught heat as a catcher, and I caught heat in the courtroom.
Perfect. Yeah.
And the book Catching Heat came out, and so you can get the book. It's got all the stories in it, or you can go to my website, which is jimleyritz.com. And I do a lot of speaking engagements, of course, because I got so many stories. I do a lot of speaking to college kids because of the situation I went through with the car accident and everything that you can look up and see. And the hard times that I went through for those 3 years. But all in all, like I said, one of the greatest gifts that God has given me, number one, was to be able to experience the God gift to be able to play baseball, to be able to have the moments, to be able to share those World Series moments with those teammates, to still be part of the Yankee organization today, and to be able to still, like I said, the accident that night could have taken my life because the other driver was the one that went through the red light. It could have taken my life, and I was fortunate enough to live and to be able to move forward. And I've used that pedestal that I was given to be able to go forward to really, really try to change other people's lives and make other people realize how lucky they are and how fortunate I am. And just like I said, I read a book called The Purpose-Driven Life.
Yeah,
that was written. Yeah. That was written by a pastor named Rick Warren, who was the pastor of my church for the last 14 years out here in California. That changed my life forever, and that made me meet my wife, who I'm married to today. And that's a whole another story. But that book changed my life, and of course has made it what it is in today. And guys, listen, I hit some great home runs in playoffs and World Series history, but what I learned from that book, The Purpose-Driven Life, has changed my life to really understand that those gifts that I was given, to be able to share those, to be able to share some of the hard things that I went through with other people that might make different choices. I've been very blessed to be able to do all that, and to be 61 years old now and still enjoying life, and enjoying life even greater than I experienced as a ball player.
Well, we love the stories when, we're believers, and we know that God changes people's lives and really puts them in the right path. And, you have your history in baseball where people are always going to remember the lore of your time on the field. And what God has done for you and your family is just giving you even greater joy, for the rest of your life. And like you said, giving back to everybody you can give back to. We'll definitely link all your book to the website.
I just pulled up your website. We'll get the books and all that.
Yeah, we'll get to the website.
Thank you.
We'll make sure we put that all out there so everybody can know exactly what you're doing today and how your life has changed, which is great.
No, I appreciate it, guys. Yep, just grateful every single day.
Awesome.
Well, it's been fun, Jim. This is episode 81 of the Legends on Deck podcast with Jim Leyritz.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for coming out and
Thank you.
the show today.
Thanks.
I saw the light, I've been baptized by the fire in your touch and the flame in your eyes. I'm born